Hello, friends. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Michelle Fondin. I am the author of The Empowered Divine Feminine, Becoming an Unstoppable Woman in the 21st Century and Beyond. If you are new to my channel, welcome. Thank you for subscribing below. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications. And thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. Welcome to the Empowerment Tribe, where we talk about the pathway, the road to self-realization and self-actualization. And today's topic is, have you accepted lukewarm happiness, or have you settled for lukewarm happiness? So if you are interested in learning how to recognize whether or not you have settled for lukewarm happiness, please do stay tuned until the end of the video. I am here with my two mascots per usual. I've got Gudetama right here, and I've got Grogu, removed Grogu, right here. And I am here with my Grogu tumbler with Ticino Dandelion Caramel Nut Tea. It is a wonderful, wonderful hot tea. It is a hot day though. It's a very, very warm and actually pretty humid day for Southern California. Normally we don't get such humid weather here, but that's the way it is today. It kind of reminds me of being back east. This topic about accepting or settling for lukewarm happiness came to me after coaching several clients over the past 2 weeks. As some of you know, I do tarot readings, astrology readings, I do life coaching. And since the channel was popularized via the twin flame relationship model, I do a lot of relationship readings and coaching. So I really focus more on the clients that come to me and ask about their romantic relationships or just other relationships in general. Now, that doesn't mean that happiness has to be limited to one of those things, right? Usually, the sticking points happen to be in our romantic relationships. Sometimes the sticking points in happiness come disguised as career choice, your job, what you do for work, and how you earn a paycheck. Sometimes it has to do with your living situation, with roommates or family members or parents or grandparents that happen to be living with you or near you. And sometimes that happiness factor comes in the way of location, like where you live geographically. A lot of people are not super satisfied with where they are geographically, and I know that was the case with me up until 2018 when I moved to Southern California. But for the remainder of this video, I'm really going to focus on the happiness factor with romantic relationships because that's really my familiarity as far as coaching goes. And the topic about lukewarm happiness or settling for lukewarm came to me as a part of my coaching clients over the past couple of weeks. And it just dawned on me that many people, if not most, settle for lukewarm happiness in their relationships. And it comes to the point at which they think things are okay. Just okay. I'm doing all right. My marriage is doing all right. My relationships are doing all right. Things just happen. Life just happens, especially when you're married, some say. And I thought this at one time as well, even though I knew there was a greater truth inside of me. That greater truth had attempted to come out at several reprises, although I had stuffed it down and pushed it down and told it to go away many times. And I'd like to give you an analogy, as I like to do, to start off this video about lukewarm. If something is lukewarm and you expect it to be hot, it's very disappointing, wouldn't you say? For example, if you go to a very, very expensive steakhouse, let's say like Ruth Chris Steakhouse. I don't eat steak. I'm just giving you an example. Or you go to Mastro's and you expect that your steak and potatoes and vegetables are going to come on the plate to your table, to where you're sitting, and they're going to be piping hot. That is your expectation when you go to a high-end steakhouse. Now, what happens if you receive that steak, potatoes, and veggie and it's lukewarm? Does that make you feel happy about paying $48 to $65, which is what I would imagine that would be at those types of restaurants? Would you be happy about spending $48 to $65 for your plate if it arrived to you lukewarm? I would wager to guess that you would probably be a little bit upset, or at least ask for them to return the plate to the kitchen to be either reheated or to give you something else. Because lukewarm, when you're expecting hot, doesn't feel very good, wouldn't you say? Especially if you're paying a high price for it. Secondarily, if you go to your local coffee shop on a very, very, very cold day and it's been storming or raining or windy or snowy all day long, and you go into that coffee shop expecting a nice, hot, piping hot beverage, either a hot chocolate or a hot coffee, and the drink comes to you lukewarm, I would guess that most of you might, if you're assertive enough and not people-pleasing, might return that beverage and say, my drink really isn't that hot and it's really cold outside, so could I get a hot drink, please? As we think about those analogies of expectations of something that might be warm or hot even, and something that is returned to us as being lukewarm or not meeting or exceeding our expectations, we want that to change. And that's something very trivial, right? It's something that is temporal. And when we think about our long-term relationships, whether it be a long-term relationship with a partner or a long-term relationship with a job or career or location or house or living situation, many people tend to accept lukewarm. That's just the way things are. That's just the status quo. The passion runs out after a year or two in marriage. It's normal to settle into routine, right? All these things that we say to ourselves to justify feeling lukewarm and having lukewarm happiness. In studying the texts, which there are two of them that I'm currently reading, actually there are three that I'm reading, but I'm going to name two. The Upanishads, which is an ancient Indian text, and I do talk about it in my self-realization video, and I'll post that here, which is an ancient Indian text about 3,500 to 4,000 years old, which gives the outline for the pathway to self-realization. And then the second being Abraham Maslow's The Hierarchy. Well, it's within the hierarchy of needs, but it is the pathway to self-actualization. And in both of those, even though there are different approaches to a similar goal, even though there are different approaches, because the self-realization pathway is really the pathway to your higher spiritual self. And it's through more spiritual means, meditation, for example. And the pathway to self-actualization is really through peak experiences. And that's more the psychological pathway to your higher spiritual self. And both are valid and both kind of, meet in the middle and move upward. In any case, in both of those philosophies, joy is a huge component of that. Being joyful, happy, playful, love, feeling extreme happiness and joy, and feeling free to make your own choices, feeling free to be in the highest vibrational frequency that you could possibly be in. And for the Indian philosophy, that's becoming self-realized. And for the Abraham Maslow philosophy, that's becoming self-actualized, having peak experiences that you can even elect to keep having and not having those peak experiences be happenstance or random. But joy is a huge component of that. And when you are feeling lukewarm in your happiness, you are certainly not experiencing much joy. There may be moments of joy, but the overall picture is not joy. The overall picture is lukewarm, is kind of just going with the status quo, going with medium levels of happiness, if not lower than medium levels of happiness. And so after speaking with a lot of these clients, I realized that many of them are staying in marriages that they're just not happy with. They might be okay with it. And I even mentioned to a few of these clients that it's almost like you have a roommate, right? You have a roommate or your friends. And they agreed for the most part. And I said, well, where's the joy? Where's the happiness? Are you really, truly happy in this situation, in this relationship? And oftentimes I got the answer of, well, it's okay. Or I got the answer of, no, I'm not really happy. But I'm like, well, why are you still with this person? For some, it's responsibility. And you might be telling yourself this, if this is your case, that for some, it might be responsibility with kids or finances. And for others, it's sort of like, well, I made this agreement to do this at one time. And so I'm continue to do it because I have this agreement to do this. And what they do not realize fully is that if you are living at lukewarm levels of happiness, even in your relationships, then you are not becoming the fullest person that you could possibly become. And you are not becoming the highest spiritual levels of who you can become. And you are not becoming the most empowered that you can become. Now, energy levels have a ripple effect. So if you are maintaining a lukewarm level of happiness, your energy is radiating outward. And that's Luna, by the way. Luna rarely joins me on videos, but I told her that she could join me today and she decided to come and join me. And this is wonderful. That is joyful for me that my cat Luna is joining me for the video. Love it. But when you operate at lukewarm levels of happiness, that lukewarmness is also radiating to everyone around you. And so you're giving off lukewarm happiness vibrations to everybody around you. Now, have you ever been around someone who's lukewarm? They're not necessarily happy. They're not necessarily sad. They're just sort of there. It's not so pleasant to be around, right? You kind of want to be around people that are a little bit more joyful than you are. And so when you settle for lukewarm happiness in your relationships and you think you're doing okay because you're following your duties, you're following your responsibilities, you're following your commitments and contracts, but you're not really happy, where do you think that happiness is going to come from? And it's at this point that many people start to feel a lot of anxiety. They start to feel a lot of depression. And the anxiety and the depression are signals from your body, from your emotional body, from your spiritual body, telling you, this is not what you signed up for. You did not sign up for being lukewarm in this lifetime. You signed up for feeling joy, feeling extreme happiness and contentment, and operating at that vibration of self-realization, self-actualization, peak experiences, and highest forms of manifestation of joy in your life, no matter what that joy might be, whether it's a cat joining you on your YouTube video, or whether it's having the most fantastic, passionate, amazing romantic relationship you could ever have in your life, based on the commitment to that fantastic amount of happiness. And then when those who feel lukewarm in their happiness start to feel anxiety, and that anxiety spirals into depression, they then go to their doctors to numb that anxiety and depression. They go to their therapists and they try to unravel their childhoods and unravel their marriage and unravel their relationship with their kids and unravel all of this, when in fact, the lukewarmness of their happiness is really coming from the choices that they've made and maintained, and the fact that they're not willing to go out there to change the feeling of lukewarm. Let's go back to the restaurant analogy. If you are at one of these high-end restaurants like Mastro's or Ruth Chris Steakhouse and you get your $65 steak, we're going to raise the price now, right? You get your $65 steak and potatoes and veggies that are lukewarm. What happens to you if you are a people pleaser and you're like, I don't want to bother the server. They have enough things on their plate. I don't want to bother the manager. I don't want to bother the cook. I'm just going to eat my lukewarm steak. That entire time you're eating that lukewarm steak and potatoes and veg, chances are you're pretty upset about it. You're eating it, but chances are you're not bringing to that meal the highest vibration. You're bringing to that meal frustration. You're bringing to that meal like the lower vibrational frequencies of disappointment, frustration, upsetness, maybe even anger. And it's not the fault of the meal. It's not the fault of the server or the cook or the manager. That's on you for not voicing your inner discontentment in order to get what you desire, which is a greater amount of joy, a greater amount of fulfillment. If you are staying in a relationship because you believe it's the right thing to do, or because you believe that you committed to this, or because you believe that it's a contract, or because you believe that you might be poor, and I do write a ton about this in this book, The Empowered Divine Feminine, on romantic relationships, becoming empowered in romantic relationships. There's an entire huge chapter on that. But we have these notions that if I leave my partner, I will be poor, or if I leave my partner, I will devastate my kids, or I will ruin their lives forever. Now, at one point in time, I had this philosophy. So I'm speaking from firsthand experience. Pretty much from the get-go after I got married, I was very unhappy. Now, I'm a happy person. I'm an optimistic person. I always see the glass as half full, or 3/4 full, even when it's half full or less than half full. But I was miserable in my marriage. I was very unhappy. I married out of duty. I did not marry because I wanted it. I thought I might have wanted it. I wanted somebody, but not necessarily the person I married. I married out of duty because of having had a child out of wedlock. There was a lot of outside pressure, and I felt I wanted to do things right. But soon thereafter, I realized it was the wrong choice. But I had this notion that if you do something, you have to continue to make the right choice. And I thought I had made the right choice to do things right by society, by my family, by my child, by everything else but what I really wanted. And I did want to get married. I just knew I was marrying the wrong person. So soon after I got married, I was very unhappy about being married, and I knew I was with the wrong person and things were not going well. And about a year into it, I voiced this opinion, and my opinion got squelched. And I said, well, this is the way it is, and I have to stay here. And then a few years later, I voiced my opinion and said, this is not the marriage I want to be in. But I had this firm belief that divorce was not possible because I came from a divorced home. And I felt like that was the worst thing you could ever do to your family or your kids. So my belief system stopped me. My family stopped me. My ex stopped me. And it came to the point at which I was experiencing extreme anxiety and even depression. And I couldn't figure out why. I could not figure out why. And I was one of those people who was very lukewarm in my marriage. I was appreciative for certain things in the marriage, the stability, the house, the children, food on the table. But I was really unhappy with the relationship. And I started to make those excuses. That's just how it is. You lose passion after a year or two. You settle into routine. You can't be in love forever. And I started to make those excuses and just say those things to make myself feel better. But the whole time I was not feeling better. I was feeling worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Worse. And I remember at one point, like walking around the block after we had just bought a home in a town I wanted to be in. And it was a single family home and it had enough bedrooms to expand the family. And I really wanted this home, and it was in a nice neighborhood. And I remember walking around the block going, why am I so upset? Why am I so depressed? And I would walk and walk and walk and walk and try to walk away the depression, and the depression just was not going away. And I couldn't figure out why. And I said, on paper, everything looks nice. On paper, I get to stay at home with my kids. On paper, I have wonderful children. On paper, I have this beautiful house. On paper, I have my own car. I have food on the table. There's money in the bank. Why am I so miserable? Why am I so unhappy? And I realized a couple of years down the road that I was so miserable because I knew that I didn't want to be in that relationship. And I had such a hard time admitting it to myself because everybody around me told me, well, you're in the relationship, you made a commitment, that's marriage. And that's just the way it is. And so I'm here to tell you that the choice to remain in lukewarm happiness, if you have the goal of living to your fullest potential, if you have the goal to become self-actualized, if you have the goal to manifest more good things into your life, if you have those goals, lukewarm happiness does not at all resonate with any of those things that you would like to have. It does not. It cannot. Because lukewarm happiness is like down here, and joy and abundance is way up here. And so if you're just maintaining this in anything in your life, in anything, whether it's your relationships or your jobs or your friendships or your neighborhood or your house or your living quarters or your living situation, anything, you cannot attain joy and happiness and bliss. It's just not possible because they're not even remotely the same frequencies. Now let's just imagine for a moment if everyone lived at lukewarm happiness. If everyone was just lukewarm, what do you think the world might become if everyone was just lukewarm? If there was no joy, what would that world look like? I would kind of hate to imagine that, if you will. Because when I looked around me and I was at my gym and I was at Equinox Gym, I go to Equinox Gym and I love that gym. And for a while I didn't think I deserved it. And now I know for certain I deserve it. And that's why I got a membership again. I was looking around at the beautiful dressing room or locker room. And I was being grateful for everything, for the lockers and for the amenities and for the lotions and the mirrors and the beauty. And I was looking down at my running shoes and I was like, wow, I'm so grateful to ASICS for making these like really great, really beautiful running shoes. And then I was looking at shoelaces and I'm like, who the heck invented shoelaces? Like that's an amazing invention. And I was just thinking about people becoming so joyful to invent these things that we take for granted, becoming so enthusiastic. And entheos means the God within, enthusiastic. Becoming so enthusiastic, so joyful to create these things that we take completely for granted. Can you imagine if people didn't become joyful enough to create? If people didn't become joyful enough to have these wonderful things that we have, and they had to do all these wonderful things to get to these places, to build these things and create these things. But if everyone was lukewarm, none of this stuff would get done. And can you imagine emitting a kind of lukewarm energy to all the children growing up? Because if you're vibrating at lukewarm happiness, then you are resonating at lukewarm happiness. That means everybody in your environment is getting lukewarm. That means your kids are adopting a lukewarm attitude, that they're never going to embody extreme joy from their parents if their parents are lukewarm in their relationship. And honestly, that was a breaking point for me. The breaking point for me was, if my children continue to feel a vibration from me that is depressed because I'm not happy in my marriage, that is what they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. Now, I was putting on a happy face because I'm really good at doing that. I was putting on a happy face. I love my kids. I love my kids unconditionally. I would do anything for them. But the way I was feeling inside at that time, at that final breaking point, there were several, in the course of my marriage, but that final breaking point was I cannot live with knowing that if I stay in this marriage, my kids will grow up with a very depressed mother, and I do not want that for them. I want to be joyful so that they see joy and they experience joy and they feel joy as they're continuing to grow up. And that is what I want. So if you're stuck in lukewarm, whether it's in your romance, your friendships, your job, your career, your location, your living situation, think about what your life would look like if you chose joy and what you would need to go through to get to joy. If that feels better, then you have your answer. Because usually the clients that I'm coaching when it comes to the romantic relationships and leaving a relationship or leaving a marriage or leaving a situation, it comes for them to having enough logical reasons to do so. And usually there are not enough logical reasons to do so. Usually there's not. Because for me, logically, it made no sense that I would divorce. No sense whatsoever. My ex had a good job, there was money, there was a house, good finances, family. There was no logical reason. But my joy factor, my lukewarmness, and by that time it was way below lukewarm. But the joy factor for me was the deciding factor. I would encourage you to take a look at that if you've been settling for lukewarm, because you deserve more. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for subscribing to my channel below. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications. Thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. Thank you for sharing this video with others who could use a little bit of encouragement toward becoming empowered. And thank you so much for your support of my channel. I have 11 published books. You could donate to the channel on Patreon. You could also book a tarot or astrology reading with me. And I will see you in the next video.